Welcome to the ABQYAV Virtual Storytelling Fundraiser. We are so thankful that you have come to tune in. We're thankful for all the support you've given us throughout the year and the support that you continue to give us. Thank you so much. A little update on the ABQYAV community. I don't know if y'all have noticed, but there was a pandemic going around, and it's still going around past few months, and that kind of changed things for the ABQYAV community. We followed guidelines and we're sheltering in place all together here in Albuquerque for the past month or so. And as things have started opening up, some of us have started to go back to work, but you'll hear from all of us individually very soon. First thing I want to go over is some house rules for this event. This is being hosted on Zoom and streamed to Facebook Live. You will notice, if you're familiar with Zoom, that if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a mute button. It will not work if you are not a co-host, which none of you should be except the host. And that is by design. It'll be okay. The format of this is that each of us is going to share our story, and it will immediately be followed by a question and answer session. Now, we really want y'all to engage with these stories, and we want you to send in questions. We want to answer your questions. So the way you're going to send in questions is on Zoom. If you look at the bottom middle of your screen, there should be a chat button. You can click on that chat and the message will go directly to the meeting host, which is us, and we will select the questions that we are going to answer. We ask that you include where you're from in the question so that when we read the question out, we can say who it's from and where they are from. We also are fundraising via donor box, and if you open that chat, you can see the link to our donor box right there. And with that, we're going to transition right into the individual introductions, and where better to start than me? Hi, my name's Nate Williams. I'm from Rock Hill, South Carolina, and I've been working with Heading Home, New Mexico. It is a nonprofit that serves people experiencing homelessness. My role there has been to manage client data. When COVID-19 hit, I initially went home, was transitioned to an emergency housing shelter, and worked in direct service for a few weeks, and then transitioned back to home and working from home. Home being here in Albuquerque, not South Carolina, just to clear that up. Next, I'll invite Caitlin to introduce herself.
Thanks, Nate. My name is Caitlin Camper. I am originally from Birmingham, Alabama, but have since then called Little Rock, Arkansas my home. And well, currently Albuquerque is my home, but Little Rock will always be like my home. I work with Lutheran Family Services in their refugee and asylee resettlement department. Beside doing basic intern stuff, going around the office and helping out with a little bit of everything. My main project is a vocational culinary program that helps equip aspiring refugee chefs to gain the skills they need to be in the food industry here in the United States. So that involves a lot of coordinating with getting licensures, English classes. We do cooking classes and different catering events. So I've had a fair share of really good food since I've been here. But since COVID started, that has taken a break. unfortunately. And right now my job is mainly being in contact with clients still, calling them or messaging them to check in on them, and to set them up with various services that we have that we can do remotely with food distribution or unemployment, or different donations that we have with financial or economic help if we can. So, and I foresee that being the rest of my time here is working from home, unfortunately, but I still get to be in contact with the clients and my staff virtually. And so I still have a connection there, which I'm grateful for. And I will give it off to Tristan.
All right. Hello, everybody. Hello to those of you that know me. My name is Tristan Wall, and I'm originally from Asheville, North Carolina. But my parents live in Austin, Texas now, and recently called Charlotte, North Carolina home at school over the past 4 years. I work at the New Mexico Wilderness Alliance, otherwise known as NM Wild, which is an environmental conservation / legal organization here in Albuquerque that works across the state to protect current existing wilderness areas, get new ones designated, and work to protect New Mexico's wilderness, wildlife, and water on a daily basis. Most of my job before COVID was a lot of info booth managing at festivals and retail shops. But since COVID, I've been working from home since, I believe, right around the second week in March. And I think, like Caitlin, I'll probably be working from home for the rest of the time I'm here as well. But I've been able to stay relatively busy. I got to help build a new online hiking guide for the state of New Mexico to help increase accessibility to lesser used wilderness areas and public lands in the state, in concordance with current stay-at-home orders, and making sure that that was done in a safe manner. Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. We appreciate it. I'll pass it off to Nathan.
Thank you, Tristan. Hey, my name is Nathan Paul Bonham. I'm from St. Joseph, Michigan. I work at Casa Hermosa, which is one of Youth Development Inc.'s transitional living programs for youth and young adults between the ages of 16 and 21. Our clients are often runaways, homeless, or about to age out of state custody. Most of my job includes working with clients and teaching life skills, organizing recreational activities, providing educational and vocational assistance, and doing interviews with applicants. While Casa Hermosa did remain open throughout COVID because it is a residence, I was not there for a little over a month, and I've been back for about a couple weeks. We have our clients and staff get tested pretty regularly for COVID, and we just have new guidelines about sanitation and what cleaning stuff and wearing masks. All right, thank you. Back to you, Nate.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank everyone. Before we get started with the stories, going to kick it over to the site coordinator, Luke Rembold, for a short message.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Luke Rembold, and I have the privilege of serving as the ABQYAV site coordinator. It is a challenge and truly an honor to walk alongside these young adults each year as they engage in this opportunity for service and reflection. The tagline for the YAV program is a year of service for a lifetime of change. Many young people enter this program excited and focused on the opportunity to serve others, and we work to offer them the opportunity to partner with local agencies doing a variety of work serving the community. Whether engaged in issues of housing and homelessness, refugees and immigration, or environmental advocacy and creation care, YAV serve alongside community partners as they navigate this new place and new culture. It is indeed a year of service. But what I want to emphasize tonight is that lifetime of change. While engaged in this year of service, YAVs have the opportunity to examine their own privilege, implicit racism, different aspects of their personal identity, their relationship with the world and with God. We throw a lot at them to digest and process, knowing that this is a transformative experience that will shift and shape the rest of their lives. As a YAV alumni put it recently, there is a restlessness now, and it is harder, but it is also richer, deeper, and more meaningful. Whether YAVs go on to lives of service in education, social services, ministry, medicine, or any number of other meaningful vocations, we trust that this restlessness will remain. And that restlessness, that desire for justice, reconciliation, and peace will be an agent of change in our churches and our communities in ways that we cannot even imagine. It is an honor to be a part of that journey. And I invite you to join with us on that journey tonight through a financial gift. It costs a little over $20,000 to host a YAV in Albuquerque for a year. And YAVs do some of that fundraising on their own. But a big part of our budget is based on donations from folks like you. We have so many generous supporters in this program and are always grateful for the opportunities to connect and to learn. Your gifts allow us to explore New Mexico, engage in conversations of race, privilege, and colonialism, pay for YAV housing, and meet with local spiritual directors to help YAVs explore where God might be calling them next. Investing in these sorts of experiences for young adults yields results that ripple far beyond us. And in the same way that these stories will move you tonight, these 4 Albuquerque YAVs will soon depart from this place. But I have no doubt that they will continue to experience transformation and change and be agents of transformation and change wherever they may be headed next. Again, thank you for joining us, and let's get to those stories.
Thank you, Luke. I'd like to begin the stories with my own, and I call this story Filling a Role. In many ways, being a YAV is really a rather confusing thing to explain. I know because I've had to do it in about 300 words or less on pretty much every college application I've turned in. I remember before I officially became a YAV, it was easiest to just let people to make up their own mind and their own ideas in their head, which often carried the misguided idea that we were doing missionary work. A YAV is not a missionary. I myself, on several occasions, described it as like AmeriCorps, but through the church rather than through the feds. This is also not what a YAV is. To be frank, even though I'm a little over 3/4 of the way through my YAV year, I'm still not sure I know exactly what being a YAV means. And there's good reason for that, I promise. It's probably safe to say that my YAV year has been anything but typical, but in many aspects, it's not unique. I started off my year with a bang. A crash, really. A pickup truck hit me while I was riding my bicycle third day I was here in Albuquerque. And that resulted in several surgeries and 20 days in hospitals learning how to move my body parts again. I'd really hoped that this awful experience would be unique, but another YAV from Tucson found herself in a very similar situation. I'm going to take this moment as an aside. Please be careful when driving and slow down around cyclists. Side over. This unfortunate experience shaped roughly the first quarter of my YAV year. It delayed my planned orientation with New Mexico, the ABQYAV board, and my introduction to my work placement. In that first month or so, being a YAV to me was getting from one day to the next. Luckily, that became a lot easier when I finally began learning what my role was at my work placement. I recall my first week walking in with, in my opinion, a hilarious candy cane cast and a walker with specialized handles since I couldn't put any weight through my 2 broken wrists. I couldn't do much, but I could listen and I could type. And that's what my team asked me to do. I got to jump right into team meetings discussing the circumstances of clients, picked up lingo very quickly and learned the names of various medications for folks dealing with opioid dependency or psychosis. I was introduced to the various filing system my team had been using and given the task to essentially overhaul and build new systems to better organize client data. That was about all I could do, and I poured myself into it. At my work placement, being a YAV meant pouring myself into the limited work I could do and learning as much as I could. However, if I've given you the impression that being a YAV is all about work, I have to inform you it most certainly is not. When COVID-19 hit New Mexico and heading home sent all non-essential workers home, I was left with what felt like nothing. I, like many others, had fallen into the trap of letting my work define my life rather than me defining work as part of my life. With nothing to do but stay at home for the good of the community, I kind of spiraled. I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't have any structure. I just kind of passed the time for 2 weeks. When I got the news that I would be working at one of the emergency shelters heading home and established for those particularly at risk of COVID-19 experiencing homelessness, I was over the moon. I got to relive all of the listening and learning I experienced when I first came into my office job, but this time it was in direct service to clients. The work was meaningful to me. I had structure again, and I gained many relationships with clients that taught me so much. Which means that 3 weeks later, when the ABQYAV board and Luke decided correctly that the safety of YAVs was more important than YAVs showing up to be essential workers, I grieved. And I like to think I grew. Being at home the past month or so has given me the opportunity to put more energy into examining the things I care about, but can't necessarily work directly towards at the moment. It's been an opportunity to study and learn about the criminal justice system and capital punishment, affordable housing and the role landlords have in perpetuating poverty, and the history of colonialism, imperialism, and white supremacy that has shaped this city, this country, and pretty much every institution in it. See, to me, a YAV gets the opportunity to fill a role. Sometimes that role isn't obvious, and it often changes at a moment's notice, and there's always more than one at any given moment. Going forward, I don't know what roles I'll have the opportunity to fill, but my time as a YAV has helped me prepare for whatever role comes next. Thank you.
All right, so the way that it'll work after one of us tells our stories is that we invite y'all to send questions to us via the Zoom chat in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Kind of like Nate mentioned, if you could put your name and where you're from so that we can get a real idea of who you are when you're asking your question, that would be great. So please don't hold back sending those in, because we would love to answer any questions that you guys might have to the best of our ability. So to get the ball rolling, Nate, just a general question while we wait for people to send some in. What aspects of community life have you found to be the most uplifting given the unique nature of this year?
Yeah. I think probably the most uplifting thing has been the way in which our community engaged in a larger ecumenical community with some fellow religious volunteers here in town, the Jesuit volunteers. I think I have really appreciated our friendship with them. I first met them, like I mentioned, in the first months of being here, in a walker with a cast or two. I can't actually remember. But I really like the way that our community has been able to get out and interact with other folks. The way that our community is invited to, has been invited to like individual things that certain work placements are going on. Like when we would go to a Beyond the Plate event for Caitlin's work, for example. I think that's been sort of the most uplifting thing for me, because it was a way to sort of get out into the community, which I didn't, like, that was missing for so long in the very beginning. And so all of those things I cherish a whole lot, and they've been very uplifting.
Cool. Let's see. This question comes from Gloria Mirabel from Second Pres here in Albuquerque. And she would like to know, what can a city like Albuquerque do to help the homeless in the most meaningful way?
Well, if you're wanting to know what you can do as a citizen versus what the city government, the municipal government of Albuquerque could do, two very different answers. As a citizen, I would encourage folks to volunteer at Heading Home, volunteer to make masks, donate supplies. One of the biggest things we ran into with the emergency housing shelters was folks needed towels. We set up a new shelter with showers and facilities that folks needed, and they didn't have towels, so they didn't have the means to dry themselves. And so reaching out to the organizations that exist, asking what they need, huge, goes really far. By extension, reach out to your city councilman, call the mayor, vote. Be proactive with your local representatives and tell them what you want. And if you don't know what you want regarding people experiencing homelessness, I can give some ideas. I would say more funding for housing vouchers. Heading Home operates on a housing first model, meaning that essentially it's a lot easier for folks to overcome some of the barriers they may have to employment, for example, if they have a stable environment to deal with those barriers in. Housing is, it's huge. So more vouchers for housing. Try to tear down the stigma around people experiencing homelessness, and reach out to Heading Home and ask how you can help.
Cool. I think we have time for one more question. So we're going to combine two. So another one from Gloria Mirabel at Second Pres here in Albuquerque, along with one from Jen here in Albuquerque. So this one from Jen, who or what did you rely on for support after your accident and subsequent surgeries that would have been so difficult to go through? And from Gloria Mirabel again, are you completely healed from your injuries?
So first, Gloria, yes, I think so. I rode 100 kilometers this morning, so I think I'm healed. So I think so. Maybe outside of not being able to bend that so far. As far as support systems, as soon as I got to Albuquerque, I had a lot of support from people connected to the ABQYAV program. Because I got here immediately, I got here and immediately found myself in the hospital, for better or for worse. I met a lot of folks in the hospital. I met the CEO of my work placement and chair of the YAV board, Dennis Plummer, in the hospital. My family was a huge help. The other YAVs were a huge help. But yeah, people connected with the Albuquerque YAV community were huge. It was like, if it was going to happen, it was probably in this setting that it was the best way to happen, because even though I was brand new in town, I already had connections with Albuquerque Police Department. I had folks coming to me, sending prayers all the time, offering to get me sweet tea or food or anything I needed. Tons of cards, tons of folks back home. Just a huge outpour of love and support. And yeah, just a lot of folks that are involved with the Albuquerque YAV program coming through. They're good people. It's a good program. You should support it.
All right, cool. I think that puts us right at about the end of the questions. So thank you, Nate.
All right, good stuff. We are going to kick it on over to Caitlin real quick for a quick update on our fundraising.
Hello. Okay, so I have a cactus to represent our progress, and we've been doing really well. You all have been doing really well. Right now, the last time I checked, we were at $1,738.28, and that is over halfway to our goal of $3,000. And our cactus is growing quite along. So as the program continues, I will be updating the board and coloring it all in as everyone is donating. And we are so thankful for you being here and thankful for your financial contributions.
Thank you, Caitlin. And thank you, Caitlin, for your artistic ability. I certainly would not be able to draw a cactus, that is for sure. I'm actually going to kick it back to Caitlin. But before I do that, just want to mention, if you're wondering how to donate, the donor box link is in the chat. You can still click on it. I believe we should be able to get that resent in the chat, so it's brand new. There it is, perfect. You can click there, donate, see the progress live, and we'll be coming with you at the updates every now and then. And now I'm going to kick it back over to Caitlin for her story.
Great. Thanks, Nate. So I just titled this Growing Pains. So I found writing a story for this event to be difficult in light of all the protests fighting against police brutality. My story just didn't feel very relevant to me But after taking some time for reflection, I found some connecting pieces. Grief, anger, confusion, prayer, and growth. This cycle of emotions, feelings, and responses has been consistent throughout my YAV year, as I have been and continue to grapple with the complexity of our current reality. I don't want to downplay the positive parts of my YAV year because they are plentiful, but focusing on where I am currently in my year here is what I feel called to share to you all. But I wouldn't be in this place without my experience from the last 8 months. So I'll start with back in November, the YAVs traveled to the US-Mexico border. There we visited the wall and we learned its history. We learned stories from people who struggled to survive crossing the desert and stories of people who didn't make it. We celebrated and took time to remember and lift up those precious souls whose lives were lost. Vigils are held often for these folks, dating 20 years back, and I was privileged to be a part of one. Presente, we'd shout after hearing the name of someone whose body had been identified. Even those bodies without names, those whose families are still waiting to hear from, those named desconocido, we exclaimed, presente, to show that their lives and their spirit matter too. After this experience, we mourned as a group. Some grieved, some felt anger, lots of questions going through our heads. We also prayed in the form of song. We are praying, oh, we are praying. We are praying, oh, we are praying. We are one, many, we are family, and oh, we are praying. Although I was not directly connected to the lives we were praying for, the grief still felt profound. We sang the same song a few weeks ago during worship on Pentecost Sunday. Similar to our time at the border, this song was sung after an emotional week. Once again, precious lives were being mourned and people were grieving. George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, to name only a few. Presente. To keep these names lifted and remembered, I am seeing and hearing I Can't Breathe and Black Lives Matter and say her name, say his name. I am seeing groups of people all over the country to celebrate and mourn these lives tragically lost. Beautiful murals are flooding cities, protests are filling the streets, petitions are streaming the internet, and voices are demanding justice. In my own experience, I've signed petitions and I've donated online and in person. I've marched to the state capitol in Little Rock holding signs to stand in solidarity with women demanding equal rights and treatment. My ideas of activism have been formed and shaped by protesting in predominantly white spaces. It's where I was taught how to peacefully engage with injustice and to fight for change. My white privilege and privilege of peace allows my engagement with injustice to be turned on and off. That is not the reality of Black and Indigenous people of color. Their fight for injustice is often one of survival, and their responses to daily injustice may look different than mine. Despite the discomfort I may have felt, it is not my place to tell a person of color how to mourn or how to grieve. At first, I didn't know what to do with that. If anything, my faith has taught me to always show compassion and love, even to those who cause the most harm. But I am not part of the group of people who live in fear of being harmed. Today, white supremacy and racism has caused the most harm to innocent Black and brown lives. This evil manifests itself in many forms, but the law enforcement system seems to be at the forefront right now. Not all the individuals who work under the system, but the entity under which they work. Police officers in the US alone have killed close to 1,000 people each year since at least 2015. Those killings being disproportionately Black Americans. As of late, 463 people have died at the hands of the US law enforcement, making this year consistent with the past. Since April of 2018, 26 lives have been lost while in the custody of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The number of bodies in the desert is unknown. Hearing these numbers breaks my heart. But after feeling angry, one of my first instincts is to remember their humanity and to try to see these individuals separately from the system they work for. And that's been really hard to do. When I brought up all these complicated feelings to a good friend, she referred to this process of discernment as growing pains, which I've come to realize is exactly what faith is to me. Faith isn't meant to be stagnant. It moves and stretches us, sometimes slowly, like the growing pains we feel deep in our bones. It isn't fun, but it's inevitable. Except when it comes to faith, and with the help of white privilege, many of us have the option to ignore that pain and opportunity for growth. White people of faith have the privilege of peace. My exposure to different responses to injustice is growing, and I'm still finding my place amidst this fight for change. For me, that search has included a lot of listening and reading and thinking, and as another dear friend said, an astute awareness to remain utterly humble during it all. Though I do not have the exact answers, I do know that as a person of faith, this pain and these complicated feelings are crosses I must bear for my Black and Indigenous and immigrant siblings. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Caitlin. We have one question in right now, and this one is from Dennis here in Albuquerque. And for those of you who don't know, Dennis is the chair of the ABQYAV board here in Albuquerque. Dennis would like to know, he says, Caitlin, I imagine like many, this has been one of the first times of aloneness that you've experienced quite this way, even while in community. Are there things about yourself that you have learned through isolating and working from home?
Wow. I've always considered myself to be a pretty introverted person, and since being home and isolating, even within our YAV community, I realized that I have a deep longing for being outside and with people, and even communicating regularly with people virtually. Just I don't feel that same connection as I would in person. I'm not sure exactly why that is, because I feel like I'm connecting with people constantly on my phone or FaceTime or Zooming, or but it's just different. I don't know if that answered the question in full, but I guess my need for the community outside has been really important to me. I find meaning in doing stuff with people versus experiencing things on my own.
Cool. Thank you. Another question, this one from Sue Williams in Rock Hill, South Carolina. What are your plans after your YAV year?
Yeah, so after this year, I am moving back home to Little Rock, Arkansas to start a new job with the Women's Foundation of Arkansas as the statewide impact coordinator. And I'm not sure exactly what all that entails, but part of it I know is that I'll be focused a lot on outreach and spreading the services and the mission of the Women's Foundation across the state, because I think it's pretty localized in the central Arkansas area, and just to reach people in the northwest and southern part of the state, I think will be a heavy part of my job. Thanks for asking.
All right, one more question. This one from Kay Huggins here in Albuquerque. He says, I love your focus on humility. How will you teach other white Christians about humility?
It's funny that you ask that, because I'm in the middle of actually trying to have that conversation with a family member who is a person of faith who is also white and is struggling to see the injustice that's being done. And I think I think being honest and reaching out and having those conversations with the people who are having trouble seeing things. That's a good question, Kay. Yeah, I guess, I'm honestly not sure how to engage white Christians, but it's something I'll keep in mind when I am within church settings. But usually when I'm in a church setting, it's with fairly like-minded people. And so another aspect of growth that I've had is being in conversation with other white Christians who aren't seeing things the same way other people are, and are seeing whites being discriminated against. And so I think within myself, that struggle is being willing to have that honest conversation with people with whom I have good relationships with, even if we have different views, to really actively engage and not try and agree to disagree, but to work through that conversation together.
Cool. Looks like we got time for one more question. So this one is from Roger Powers here in Albuquerque. He says, "Hi, Caitlin. Thank you for your engagement and activism for justice. You mentioned that you have spent a lot of time listening. What can you teach us about compassionate listening?"
Wow, these are all really good questions. Compassionate listening. I think for me, compassionate listening is not coming to a conversation or hearing someone speak with already preconceived notions of what I think they believe or what I think they're going to say, but to really focus on what they're saying and not how they say it. I think sometimes we can focus too much on the way people are sharing their feelings versus actually listening to what they are saying, and to really, focus on their words and focus on making sure that you are listening and not interrupting them. Or I think compassionate listening also takes some time for reflection, instead of quick, easy responses. At least for me, I'm a big processor, but yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks for asking.
That's all the questions we have, so I'll turn it back to Nate.
Thank you, Tristan. Thank you, Caitlin. Up next, we're going to hear a perspective from a board member. So let me introduce Takako Torino.
Oh, okay. Hello. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you what comes to mind as a board member. And before I dive in, this is the interactive part, and you can do it while still being muted. So I invite you to sort of sit up where you are, and it's been a while, and kind of stretch and breathe, deep breath. Exhale. And I'm going to invite you to take a moment to recall your young adult moment. When you found yourself in a threshold of becoming an adult, or as an adult grappling with the question, of how am I going to live, move, and have a being in this world and in God. Well, in my case, it takes me back something like 35 years ago. When I was graduating from college, I was being pulled by those two desires. Having been an international foreign student without the benefit of the federal scholarship, I really sucked everything I could from my parents who supported me, who sent me to this country to get education from Japan. So I was very eager to become financially independent and relieve the burden from my parents and become a working adult. And start, so many of the students today may be the desire to start paying student loans as soon as possible. Then that was on one hand. And I was also pulled by the other desire to take time to discern the relationship between who I am, which was a big question I had a luxury to really explore during my undergrad years. That question between who I am and what I do, or what I'd rather do, or feel called to do, and how to reconcile that with the reality that what I need to do to be self-reliant, to find a job, to start make living on my own. With this pressure to choose a path of not start making money right away or start repaying student loans or to become financially independent may feel like a privilege, a luxury even. But taking this time to intentionally grapple with these questions while engaging in the service work, these young adults develop foundational and lifelong discernment skills. The experience nurtures their skill that impact not just what they find themselves doing the year after YAV is over, but how they discern the service, the call, the work, and fulfillment for the rest of their lives. I credit my YAV-like experience 35 years ago, which was through Brethren Volunteer Services, as a reason that I am a chaplain now, even if it took me 25 years of having worked in a secular profession. Nate earlier mentioned Jesuit volunteer program. There's a Brethren volunteer program, and this YAV is our PCUSA, Presbyterian program. I'm so honored to be able to serve on its board. And another valuable component of YAV program that I find so worth my support is the commitment to simple community living. Community. In our struggles for economic and racial justice and for equity in this country, we are learning increasingly that one of the strengths of the United States American culture, individualism, also lies at the root of social ills we suffer. By placing themselves in an intentional community that practices direct nonviolent communication and other valuable tools, the YAV program aid our young people to be an effective advocate for social change. I'm a native of Japan, the land of collective thinking. In Japanese culture, social harmony is highly valued, and we get that. We Japanese get what is good for the society as a whole is ultimately good for the individual members of it. But in the process, individual creativity and personal freedom is sometimes sacrificed. And as a young person, I was actually 15, I came to this country because I felt the emphasis, the strength of the individualism and personal freedom at the time allowed me to live into and explore the potential of who God had made me to be. And I must say, I feel like I really thrived in that culture. Yet I know that The unchecked individualism kills the collective whole. In a culture of excessive individualism, we must nurture in our young people the perspective to see oneself as part of a whole, to make decisions based on what benefits this whole community. I believe YAV years give the opportunity to grow in that regard as well. YAVs are already making the commitment to simple living. They could have spent this year working at whatever secular job that was available to them, but they have opted to spend 1 year for this work, this inner work, while they engage with external service work. They are doing their part. But without the support of those who believe in the value of creating this opportunity for our young people, well, the opportunity will just remain a dream. This is my third year on the board, and I have seen the fruit of the program. I've seen the growth of these young people who have gone through the program. And every year has been different. There's no formula, you never know what's gonna happen. And it's remarkable how they navigate and grapple with the challenge. So I invite you to join me now in supporting this ministry of the church and invest in this program. Thank you. I think, Mr. Moderator, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Takako. That was a perspective from a ABQYAV board member. Up next, we have a very exciting fundraising update from Caitlin.
Hello. Guys, our cactus has come into full growth and even has flowers. We are currently at $3,357.71. And we're only halfway through the program. So you guys are really great. I don't really know what to do to keep going. I guess I'll draw another cactus, a different kind of cactus. This is a barrel cactus. Maybe I'll do saguaro or something. We have another side. So keep enjoying the program, and we greatly appreciate all of your support. I'll give it back to Nate.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. I suggest prickly pear, but that's just me. Thank you to everyone who has given so far. We appreciate it so much. We appreciate your investment in us and in this program. The link to the donor box has been posted again in the chat. By all means, please, we appreciate all of your giving so much, and please give more. Up next, we are going to hear from Tristan. Take it away.
Cool, thank you, Nate. Unlike my cohorts this evening, I do not have a title for my story, so I'm just going to jump right into it. So I wanted to take this time to talk about one of the core YAV tenets, which has probably been the most challenging, one of the most challenging and one of the most eye-opening aspects of this year for me. And that core tenet is intentional community. This is one of the core elements of a YAV year, and for many other YAVs across the world and YAV alumni across the world that I know, was one of the main reasons that they chose to embark on this journey. For me, however, it is something that required a lot of learning and adaptation. During your initial interview with the site coordinator, they may ask you what intentional community means to you. I can clearly remember when Luke asked me this question, and I really had no idea what to say. I think I just repeated the phrase back in a more verbose way that didn't actually clarify anything. I also believe that when asked what my biggest challenge in intentional community would be, I said something along the lines of cleaning schedules. It's safe to say my knowledge and perspective towards intentional community was very novice and needed tweaking. Thankfully, this year has provided me with plenty of experiences, interactions, and communities to help broaden my perspective surrounding this notion. So the first big intro I had to this theme was on the New Mexico Pilgrimage for Unity, an ecumenical walking pilgrimage which covers 50 miles over the course of a weekend through the desert in northern New Mexico. All from our house who were able to go alongside a group of many Presbyterians, Roman Catholics, Quakers, Episcopalians, and Unitarian Dan woke up at 4:30 every morning so we could start walking by 5:30. If you all see Kay Huggins in the chat, she was so kind to walk past our rooms with the bell and graciously wake us up every morning. This pilgrimage was certainly a huge test of my endurance, but it was worth it in the end. We were walking 13 plus miles a day in intentional community for one short weekend. We were an intentional community centered towards building unity between faith groups of many backgrounds to create a better world for all of God's children. We built relationships which continue to impact us and make us laugh to this day. But even after having this incredible experience, which introduced me to an intentional community outside of our house, which is where I was still learning what it looked like, it's hard for me to describe. So in classic YAV style, I'm going to give you 3 words which illustrate what intentional community means to me. You can call it my core tenets of intentional community. So for me, it narrows down to intensity, mindfulness, and compassion. Starting with intensity, our house, along with the Tucson YAV site and the site coordinator from Austin, went on a 10-day border delegation to Agua Prieta, Sonora, Douglas, Arizona, and Tucson, Arizona this past November, as Caitlin mentioned. Though the trip was eye-opening and wildly educational, it was also incredibly intense. After all, this was not a simple trip or vacation. This was a trip with a clear message and a clear purpose, which everyone present was tuned into the entire time. It was more than our house just going somewhere together. It was a community rooted in intentionality, engaging in hard work and discourse surrounding the evils around the American-Mexican border wall. It was the intentionality of our community gathered which made this trip so intense. And this notion didn't stop at our border delegation. We have continued to have intense experiences, interactions, and conversations since then. Being in an intentional community such as this, and especially during a time such as this, means being pushed to the edge of your comfortability and exposing yourself to the intensity of the world around you. It was a constant practice of being intensely mindful and tuned in constantly to what we were learning and seeing and who we were talking to and what they were telling us. Which leads me into my second word, which is mindfulness. This notion is probably the one that I find myself practicing most frequently. Mindfulness is certainly a practice which has become wildly popular for our generation, and I think for good reason. When I first came here, I found myself wondering how I was supposed to practice living in an intentional community, let alone do it right. So I started with being mindful of my presence and my actions. At the beginning, it was trying to see where I would leave my shoes or my dishes, and then into how my language and actions were perceived by others both inside and outside the house. Always having my mental switch turned on and being aware of my presence in the world and how that relates to others. I think now, however, especially now, it has become more important. As I see the protests in the street for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, lives lost among far too many others, I have to remember to be mindful always moving forward. Mindful of how my skin grants me privileges, and mindful that as a white man, space is systematically set aside for me to be in. Intentional community cannot stop here. It must be a practice of intentionally living my life with mindfulness always, to create a better world and dismantle the systems which favor me and have favored people like me for far too long. Which brings me to my final word, compassion. Our house has been through a lot this year. We all have things which we brought with us, and we all have things which we've taken on during this year as well. Intentional community does mean pushing yourself in an intense effort to be in a difficult place of discussion and action. And it also means being ever mindful of who you are and how your actions alter the world around you. But it also means doing someone's dishes for them when you know they've had a long day. It also means sitting in the silence with each other after a hard morning check-in. It also means giving each other the space to be alone during a mournful anniversary. It means showing compassion to everyone you come across, both inside and outside of your house. Our community, being an intentional Christian community, is called to share the love of God with everyone we encounter to the best of our ability. We are called to be compassionate in thought, word, and deed always. To close, I will admit that while this experience living in an intentional community has been incredibly eye-opening and informative, it's not always fun. I won't speak for every one of us, but I'm sure that I have irked everybody in our house from time to time over the past year. It's hard, it's rough, and it isn't always fun. But that's the nature of the work that YAV puts us in. Work isn't always upbeat and involved. It's hard work, and as our role of accomplices in this justice work and not as frontline workers, it oftentimes can be hard to see an impact. However, I think we will all be thankful for this experience when we go our separate ways in a little over a month. Thankful for the time together, the time alone, and the times which were hard. But most importantly, thankful for the times of intensity, the times of mindfulness, and grateful for all the compassion shown by and given to all of us during this crazy year. Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan. Just a reminder to folks, you can submit questions for the Q&A in the chat. Send them to Presbytery of Santa Fe, and we'll be ready to ask them and include include where you're from. First question for Tristan, just to get the ball rolling. Since it probably wasn't a cleaning schedule, what was the hardest aspect of living in, what has been the hardest aspect of living in intentional community so far?
I think it was probably something I realized, I wouldn't say relatively like early on, but not terribly late on either. And it's around simple living and kind of finding the balance between our community all making an effort for simple living, which for those of you who don't know is one of the core tenets also of the YAV program. And kind of find the relationship between our house making an effort to simple living, but also realizing that that's different for everybody and not being concerned with someone else in the house not going about living simply in a way that I am or I was, and kind of just learning to realize that it looks different for everybody. Kind of like I said, we all have different things that we brought with us, and how everything that we brought with us, everything we've taken on, and everything kind of just about like who we are will impact the way that we live our lives and live simply in that regard as well. And just kind of, you know, not, I don't want to say like not judging people, because I normally try to make an effort not to judge people, but not getting upset if someone was doing a practice that I had said I wasn't going to do because that was how I wanted to practice simple living, if that makes sense, I think. Yeah.
Makes sense to me. Next, we've got a question from George Huggins of Second Presbyterian Church here in Albuquerque. What's the biggest challenge in the wilderness of New Mexico?
I don't know. I mean, so I haven't spent a whole lot of time in the wilderness per se. I've spent a good bit of time, but it varies, because you can be in the Sandias right outside of town, which is a wilderness area, but it's very, it's not developed, but you know, it's high use. There's people on almost every trail. There's, you know, the tramway, there's a restaurant at the top, but you can go down south, like just in the middle of nowhere, and just be completely alone for a while. But I guess I did do one trip back in December with some folks from work over a weekend. And I think the the hardest part of being in the wilderness is, for me, the hardest part was kind of having this experience where you're in an area of land that has the highest level of protection that the government can grant to somewhere. So it's not like, for any of my folks who are tuning in who have gone hiking in Asheville, it's not like when you go hiking in Asheville or Montreat and you can see I-40 from almost any spot, on any peak. It's, you know, completely remote. And the hardest part is going into one of those remote places, I think, for me, and really getting that intensive experience of being just completely removed from everything else in the world and seeing just this real, raw, unfiltered kind of reality of what the world has in store for you if you go out and seek it. And then returning back to your normal life after that, if that makes sense. And kind of realizing that there are these places of intense solitude out there, but that the nature of what we've constructed as a society makes it so hard to really get in touch with the natural world in its really, like, in its most pure form that you can find. How that is one of the hardest things to do, and how it's also, if you're able to go out there to those really remote areas and those really just like places that are just way out there, how that's a really privileged experience too, because you got to have a truck with 4x4 wheel drive and super high clearance, and you got to have camping gear, you know, and kind of realizing that we've made that ability to experience the world that we live on one of the most removed experiences you can have, but also one of the hardest journeys to even get to be able to have that experience, I think, is how I would answer that.
Thank you. I think we got time for one more. This is from Conrad here in Albuquerque. You refer to simple living, and I think I know what you mean, but maybe I don't. What is simple living?
I think it depends on just a lot of things. You know, one, who you are, where you come from, where you're working. It's something I think it's up for you to define. So for me, coming in, I was kind of used to, you know, living that broke college lifestyle for the past 2 years, and trying to make the most out of little moments and stuff. So I wasn't as concerned with like budgeting and whatnot when I came. For me, simple living turned into not overcomplicating things, if that makes sense. So not putting myself in a place mentally that was unnecessary and unproductive, I think, and kind of finding a more straightforward, like, simple route to get to somewhere. Whereas for someone else, it could be, I need to practice more financial stringentness. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but, you know, I think you get the gist, something like that. Or it could be, I need to, or one of the main things that I started practicing at the beginning of the year was not using my car as much as I needed to. Because where I work, even though I've been working from home for the past 3 or 4 months, is it's like a 10-minute walk down the street. So there really was no need for me to drive at all. So that was one of the other main things that I have been trying to practice in terms of simple living. So, I mean, you know, it depends on who you are. And I think that you need a little bit of an adjustment period as well to figure out what it looks like, especially in the YAV program. Once you get little bit adjusted to your work site and a new city and a new community. And you kind of once you get your feet in the water a little bit, then you can say, okay, here's how I can kind of build off of this and start looking at how to live simply. But yeah, it depends on every person.
All right. Thank you very much, Tristan. We are going to kick it back over to Caitlin for another fundraising update as soon as she is ready.
Thanks, Nate. So I've been in the process of drawing another cactus tortilla pear just for you, Dennis. Can't really see it, but our new goal has been changed to $4,000, and those are the flowers that you'll see on this cactus. But right now we are currently at, I believe, $3,560.25. So, thanks again, everyone, for contributing. I'll give it back to Nate for our last story.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. Just a reminder, you can find the link to the donor box in the chat. Thank you to everyone who has given so far. Thank you for investing in us and in this program. And we are approaching our last story from Nathan Paul Bonham. So kick it over to you, Nathan.
Hello, everybody. The computer I was on got all jittery and froze up, and so I'm from Luke's computer. In just a sec, while I pull up what the story I have to say.
Tristan, you want to ask one of our other questions real quick?
There we go. Okay, yeah, sure thing. Let me get to where I saved it. I guess this could be for any of us. This was a question that Tucson Yavs asked us. So, goodness, where is it? Here it is. Okay. They want to know, what are some ways you would say as a Yav community y'all have strived to address systematic racism both now and before this current push on a national level for Black Lives Matter? And I think this was originally asked after Caitlin spoke, but I think if any of us want to talk, we can.
I think that probably one of the largest ways we've been trying to embrace anti-racism as a house of 4 white Christians has been through trying to educate ourselves on things that we are ignorant to because of our privilege. We have been doing a lot of reading, a lot of learning about new issues, looking into issues of prison liberation, looking into issues focusing on the border, border imperialism, border militarization, both while we went and visited the Mexico-US border in Douglas and Agua Prieta, but also here by engaging with the work placements of some of our friends in the Jesuit volunteer program, the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center, and just trying to learn as much as we can, learn what's going on, showing up to protest on Freedom Fridays, which is a protest that is fighting for the release of folks seeking asylum in detention. There are several detention facilities around the Albuquerque area, and there's no law that says that people who are seeking asylum need to be held in detention, and it's particularly dangerous right now to be in detention with COVID-19 going around. So getting out, demonstrating, learning as much as we can, showing up where we're invited to be, and knowing when we're not. I think that's a few of the ways that we've been trying to embrace anti-racism.
Cool. And
We're good to go on this end.
yep, that's what I was about to say. So we'll just turn it over to Nathan now.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Tristan. All right. So this year has been full of stories, and most of them aren't mine. The stories that'll stick with me the most from this year are the stories, both tragedies and comedies, and tales of successes and failures that I have read, witnessed, and been told by clients and staff. While I hold these stories and I ponder them in my heart, they're not mine to share. So I will tell of a strange experience that I was a part of. I'm at the point in the closing of my time at ABQ where I am taking stock of the people, places, and things that I'll miss the most as I move to whatever homes may be. I'll miss New Mexican food. I'll miss the waiter asking red or green, and I'll reply Christmas. And I'll miss being in a place where that exchange makes any sense. I will miss the uphill walk to the Guild Cinema and the downhill stroll back. I will miss the Norbertine Abbey and their library. And I will miss the motley crew of people I work with. COVID sheltering in place put a stopper in all those things. Eating out, going to the cinema, visiting the library, and for a time, a little over a month, going to work. Now it's Sunday, April 26, 2020, 2 weeks workless, and I've spent almost the entire time in the daytime shadow and the nighttime glow of First Prez's steepled neon cross. I've spent my morning in the streamed churches of Otis Moss III, William Barber II, Michael Flager, and my father. I feel a profound need for my body to move and to be embraced by sunshine. I grab my uncle's maroon hand-me-down 1980s Trek. Now I'm cycling north on Paseo del Bosque Trail. On this busy sun-soaked Sunday, I pass people of all sorts. Young and old, short and tall, lean and large, women and men, tattooed and plain-skinned, bearded and shaved, one-legged and two, rich people on $5,000 bikes and those on $100 rides from Walmart. I am overwhelmed. So, lost my spot. I am overwhelmed on the ride. I am overwhelmed by the sunshine. I am overwhelmed by the trees and the leaves and the stream and the cloud and the mountains. So beautiful it felt like I was pedaling through Eden. But most of all, I was overwhelmed by seeing such a variety of people after being physically separated. I look down to my front wheel rolling over the black asphalt and I look up. And it seems to me that the skins of the people I pass and who pass by me, human skin in all its different shades, is reflecting the sun like mirrors. And as often happens when light meets a reflective surface, I am blinded. I look down, tire on asphalt. I look up again, and now it seems like the people in all their diversity are radiating light. While the glow comes from them is like sunshine, it is not reflecting off of them. Instead, it is coming up from deep in them, a timeless, paradisal inner light, showing and shining and shimmering like the sun, meeting the visible world where their skin meets the air. And I'm no longer blinded. I am tearing up. I feel like a Labrador retriever who has once again seen the humans in whom he stands in special relation. After 2 weeks of sleeping, it is like waking up from a dream of separation, a spurious self-isolation in a closed-off world. This sense of liberation from illusory difference is such a relief, such a joy that I almost laughed out loud. It feels like such a glorious destiny to be a member of the human race. Though we are a species dedicated to many absurdities and one which repeatedly makes terrible mistakes, yet I think while my feet move round and round and round, that yet with all that, God's self, glorified and becoming a member of the human race. I reach the end of my ride. I dismount, turn the bike around, and I'm riding back the way I came. I wave at all the people who are shining like the sun, and some of them wave back. All of them are beautiful. All of them are unique. All of them are distinct. And all of them are irreproducible. And I feel, I know somehow, that the fiery glow burning through them, through us, yet not consuming, has its genesis in the same force that lit the stars. I return to the house beneath the neon cross that gives shade in the day and light at night. I work my way back from a sense of divine unity, from the oceanic dissolution of the specific ego, an unknown perspective that cannot be long held, and an unfamiliar weight that cannot be long borne. I work my way back to a localized and specialized being, so I might once again take care of myself as a specific entity. My hand to stop shaking. I head to the kitchen. I'm cutting celery for cabbage soup. After all, it's hard to chop celery as a generalized cosmic phenomenon. And I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next. And that's it for me.
Cool. Thank you, Nathan. Oh, there's Luke.
Seeing what the questions are that came in.
Okay. All right. Well, while Luke's looking for one of those, we will ask one of the ones we have prepared. So let me find it. So you mentioned in your story that bike riding brought you a lot of peace and joy, especially during this hard time in quarantine. So what are some other activities or resources you've utilized to kind of replicate that in a different manner?
So during the time of quarantine or social distancing or shelter at home, most of self-care was in reading. And I feel like I should note that when I was trying to, I guess, put words to a strange experience, especially strange for me, I took a lot of inspiration from Thomas Merton, Toni Morrison, David Foster Wallace, Aldous Huxley, and Saint Teresa of Avila, and trying to put words. So that's just a little bibliography for the people I'm indebted to. And also talking to my spiritual director, which is never had a spiritual director before this year, and it's been incredibly helpful.
Cool. Well, I think that is about all the time we have for questions. So thank you again, Nathan, and I will turn it back to Nate.
Thank you, Tristan. Thank you, Nathan. Yeah, so we're gonna send it over to Caitlin for our final fundraising update. I have a feeling it's going to be a good one.
Okay. Thanks, Nate. Guys, we did it. Did it. We are at $4,064.71. I added extra flowers for that little extra after, but we are so grateful for your support financially, emotionally, spiritually, all of it. And I guess I'll give it back to Nate for a final word before we leave. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you so much to everyone who tuned in, who donated. The support tonight has been incredible. You all are incredible. We appreciate you so much. We appreciate all of the support you've given spiritually, financially, sometimes even physically. Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. This program isn't possible without folks like y'all contributing. And well, tonight y'all made it possible. Thank you so much.